This is Kevin Collins with Home Theater Forum. We're here at SpectraCal with Derek.
Hi.
SpectraCal is down here in downtown Seattle, kind of by the historic Gaswork Parks. What kind of made you choose this location?
For us, we needed a location that was centrally located for Seattle. We've got a lot of people that work south of here and north of here. LA, my other business partner, works just essentially up the road, so it was a good central location for us.
So there's a lot of Home Theater Forum members that might not know exactly what SpectraCal is. Can you kind of tell us what is SpectraCal?
Sure. SpectraCal, we develop video calibration software, primarily for video projection systems, flat panels, display systems. Our primary product is called CalMan. The company's been around for just over 6 years. It started off as a passion for me. My background is primarily in audio calibration, designing amps, crossover speakers, going back about 20-25 years. I built a home theater system back in 2002, designed my own speakers and the whole home theater, and then put it in a projection system. And I wasn't happy with the video quality or the colors. And so I thought, well, I can easily do this. And I went out and started looking and found that the tools that were available for the enthusiast were either very limited or very, very expensive. And my background in software development for over 25 years, including with LA Heberlein as well, we sat down and decided to start writing some software primarily for our own use. And that was essentially what we started off with, CalMan version 1 and 2. We started getting inquiries from the professional markets in developing a professional version of it. And so we developed CalMan version 3 and took that to CEDIA, that was approximately 4 years ago. And that was basically the beginning of the formation of the company. Now we've got 2 locations and a whole handful of developers, and essentially one of the premier products for doing video calibration.
So you and LA were the co-founders?
Yes, yeah, about 6 years ago.
So I kind of came into really being a geek of home theater stuff when I got my Pioneer Elite. I think it was 610 or something. When way back, it was the only input it had was S-Video, was
right.
the highest.
No, I had the exact same TV.
And that's when I really got introduced into what Joe Kane was doing at the time with his digital video essentials.
Yes.
And I can remember going through and trying to just do basic calibration, but really being frustrated that there was a lot of stuff that I really couldn't get to. But more importantly, there wasn't a way for me to measure anything. I mean, it was, okay, I see the DVD, I kind of, how they can display it on, I'm supposed to get to this, but I don't really see what it is, and do I really know if my colors are right?
Right.
On the Pioneer was kind of notorious for oversaturation of red, which was kind of a sexy thing to go look at, but it wasn't really accurate. One of the questions that I always had then was, geez, would I spend money for a professional to come in, or, kind of a DIY person, do I do it myself? Where do you guys kind of fit into, I know you kind of said you do the professional market and kind of DIY market, but if you're just kind of give some overview guidance to some people on when would they want to hire a professional to come in and calibrate their system versus, how deep do they really need to be before they'd want to buy CalMan or one of those projects and go up and down the spectrum on that?
I was essentially at the same dilemma, and in fact I had the same television, the 610. I had a calibration disc, one of the early DVEs from Joe Kane, had my Blu-ray or my DVD player, and that was when they were just coming out with the component, the high definition component. And so I did those steps myself, and I had the same questions. I thought, am I doing this right? Do I understand the process? I can kind of follow the steps, but I'm not sure I'm doing it right. I have nothing else to compare it to. I don't have anybody else to confer with. And so in those days, the natural tendency was to bring in a professional, because they had training either through ISF or with Joe Kane or other schools. But today, about half our business is with the DI enthusiasts, and the other half is with professionals. So it really depends on the person. If you're kind of the ultimate tweaker, if you always like going in and just fine-tuning everything every time you get a new piece of equipment, or you change the lamp, or you want to try something new, then it's usually advantageous to essentially get the DIY software and a cost-effective meter. But if you're a guy that just says, I just want it to be right and not ever have to worry about it, and have that guy come in every 6 months to a year and just make sure it's right, then that's where the professionals come in. They can come in, they spend 2 or 3 hours, they get it set up. Most of the professionals will walk you through the process of what it takes, you know, so you're somewhat educated, you understand the process that you went through, but you know that it's right and you didn't have to worry about it. Plus, they also have equipment that most of us can't afford, you know, very, very high-end colorimetric systems and pattern generators that the standard enthusiast wouldn't be able to afford. So you have the confidence that the equipment they're bringing in is very high quality as well.
So that brings up another interesting question on the DIY part. Then my next step in graduating from that Pioneer 610 was I got a Sony G70, and you know that was a pretty big learning curve for me on just how to forget the calibration, just doing the geometry of setting up those three guns, and the focus and all that. But after that, I quickly discovered, well, geez, you know, I got my gamma, I gotta try the set. How do I actually set my colors? And I remember I worked a lot with Steve Smith, who's another local guy around here, and he'd come over because he had a G70, and we'd spend hours on this stuff. I mean, hours. You know, you just had the blue gun on, and your eyes are going crazy because you can't even see anything. But for us to get like a colorimeter, to even start to go and look at what our, you know, try to do our primary colors, we had to go, and there was a Guy Quo, the dentist guy. We'd borrow his colorimeter. So, you know, you know, but then is that thing accurate? Are we really measuring right? And it was an expensive proposition. Today, it seems like a lot of that cost has come down. Like when I was doing HDVD, I wound up getting an Minolta CS200, which was still a, you know, 10K plus device. But it sounds like now that there's a lot of things that kind of get that same level of quality, but the prices come down. Is that the case, that I can get into the game and do stuff that before I had to spend 20, 30K, but still I can be like in a lower price range?
No, absolutely. It's primarily the scales of economy. The vendors that are producing colorimeters, when we go back and look at the market 6 to 8 years ago, it was a very, very small market. So they only made a handful of them. They were typically highly specialized. And today, they build tens of thousands of them. A lot of them go into the photography markets, you know, video editing suites, and so they've been able to just through sheer scales of economy bring the price of colorimeters down. And what we can buy today for, you know, probably the $300 to $700 range, if you go back even just a few years ago, you'd have to add a zero to that. You'd be looking at $5,000 to $7,000. And so that's made it more accessible for the DIY to be able to get better quality at home than what we were able to just a few years ago.
And isn't it even like more accurate? Like my CS200 is great for color, but that's only like good down to 30 IRE. Then I have to, you know, I can't really do with that meter. I can't really test out and do my, you know, primaries and secondaries below 30 IRE because it can't measure accurately enough on that.
Yeah, and that's also another benefit from the newer equipment, is they've been able to get these meters to read essentially very, very black levels. X-Rite, one of our primary vendors that we work with, we went to them about 3 years ago and said, the displays we're starting to work with today are getting very, very black. Projectors are getting really black. We need devices that can start measuring those levels. And so they went back and started working on it, and they came up with their new meter, the D3 family. We've got our SpectraCal C6, which is based on that. And that is able to read about 10 times lower than anything we've had prior in that price bracket.
How often on something like the C6 that you mentioned, what's the price on that?
I believe the retail is $700.
So substantially cheaper than my Minolta CS200, and obviously it sounds like it can read a lot lower in terms of accuracy at lower IREs. I know on my Minolta they always said, oh, you got to get it recalibrated, you know, like every 6 months to a year. Is that something that's changed now with like the C6, where you have to constantly get it recalibrated to make sure it's accurate, so the measurements you're getting, or is it different because it's solid state or something now?
There's a number, well, to answer that in two parts, there's a number of reasons why you would get a meter calibrated or recertified. If you're a professional and you're going into somebody's home and charging money for it, then typically they get their meter certified to say that they've passed the NIST standards, so that the person you're charging money for knows that you've went through all the credentials and everything to get your equipment certified. For the home user, our C6 does come with a NIST certificate, but the design of it, its sealed optics, the design of the filters become much less an issue over time. Typically, the lesser expensive colorimeters that have come out in the past, they didn't have sealed optics, and so moisture or humidity could affect the color of the filters themselves. They drift over time. That's becoming much, much less of an issue. You know, we're getting meters in that are 3 or 4 years old that have sealed optics, and we don't see any issues with them whatsoever. You know, but those are typically been the higher end ones, you know, like the K10s that are $7,000 or $8,000. But now that they're starting to use sealed optics in these lesser expensive meters, it's becoming less and less of an issue that you need annual research or calibration, unless you're professionally needed in this cert for credibility.
The other big thing that I've noticed from the years that I've been doing calibration, you know, both being ISF and THX certified, was that when I got certified, it was a painful process to go and, you know, map down all my XY coordinates for everything. And one of my favorite things is when we had you guys out for, you attended a THX calibration thing that we had in Redmond a couple years ago. And you had it so that CalMan went and automatically put up the patterns and then zoop, did everything, you know, from 100 IRE down, and it showed me all my stuff. So I wasn't changing it, writing it down, changing it, writing it down, or entering it in.
Right.
It sounds like, from the stuff I heard from you, is like it's even gone a step further. I think you guys have a YouTube video on the Sharp Elite on where it just auto-cals through. Is that like can everyone do that in every display, or is it only certain displays, or how much does it cost to get in that game if you're a DIY person where you can, you know, really just keep doing it every couple months?
It's largely manufacturer dependent from the display manufacturer. We've been working with a number of them. We started working with Pioneer about 4 years ago. And then when they sold all their stuff up to Sharp and to Panasonic, then we started working with both those companies to be able to have access to the display either over an Ethernet port or a serial port. So it primarily is dependent on the manufacturer giving us control of the display over a control interface that CalMan can talk to. Once we've got that interface, there's a lot we can do with it. You know, the videos for the Panasonic displays or the Sharp Elite displays where we show auto calibration, that's just one piece of it. The ability to not have to go into the manufacturer's menu and figure out where things are. I was teaching a class last week here, our one-day Pro Monitor class, and the one point where, you know, everybody understands kind of the theory of how to set brightness and contrast and sharpness and tint, and then you say, okay, let's go sit down at a workstation and actually do it on a display, and they pick up the remote for the first time on a display they're not familiar with. And that's always a learning experience. You know, it takes 20 minutes just to dig through the manufacturer settings. You know, do you have to go into advanced, or do you have to turn this mode on, or this advanced mode, or this expert mode on, just to turn things on and off? And so with that, within CalMan, we provide those controls directly from within the software. We call them DDC, or direct display control. And so for instance, CalMan is a workflow-based product, and so you bring it up and we show you a task. Okay, we're gonna set brightness. So on that brightness page, we have the brightness control. You can increase it or decrease it, and we also show you what we're looking for in the pattern, and then also bring the pattern up if you're talking to a generator. So that in itself is time savings, and not having to go through all the advanced menus that you're not familiar with just to find out where those controls are. The next benefit from that is if we've got control over the white balance and gamma, then we can essentially auto-calibrate the display as well.
So who are the flat panel manufacturers that have this level of integration, and then who are the projector manufacturers?
The flat panel manufacturers that we can talk about today, Sharp, Christie, Panasonic. There are a lot of others that we're working with, but we're under NDA for flat panels. And then for projectors, it's primarily been JVC, and then we're also going to start doing work with Panasonic as well. We have, again, a lot of the projector manufacturers this year are talking to us about adding support. And it's typically what happens is we've been talking to the manufacturers over the last couple of years, pretty much all of them, but they have to schedule in when they're going to get those capabilities in. Some of them may not have a control interface we can talk to yet. You know, even internally they may not have the ability, so then they have to work it through engineering. That may take 1 or 2 model years for them to get all the capability in, and we're going to start seeing more and more of that over the next year to 2 years.
Right. So if I was a DIY person and you had this, you kind of talked about the question on would I go professional or would I do it myself? For me to get, let's just say I have a JVC RS65 or something, so that I can go hook up the SpectraCal CalMan software. What if I was going to go, you know, get a colorimeter and everything and hook it all up? how much would it, what kind of price range am I talking to be able to do the calibration myself on like the latest gen JVC projector?
For the software itself, it's approximately $200, and then we've got various add-ons for like the JVC projector AutoCal. I believe that's another $100, but that also gives you the ability for doing other displays as well. And then for the colorimeter, it varies anywhere from a few $100s to $1,000, depending on whether you want, you know, a highly calibrated NIST version of the C6 or just the OEM version of the X-Rite D3. So that's kind of variable. And then you need something to generate patterns, you know, anywhere from just a disc you can get from off the internet that you can burn yourself, to a media player based pattern generator, what we call our DPG, our digital pattern generator, all the way up through professional ones. So anywhere from probably $400, including a base colorimeter, up to probably $1,500, depending on what kind of options you need.
It's amazing. The prices has come down so much from when I was getting in the game. When you talk about the patterns, you talked about, you know, stuff that you could download from ABS forum, that you can do your own disc, to stuff like Joe Kane, or things like if you have a DVDO that has some patterns versus pattern generators that you guys sell.
Yes.
I mean, if I look at it, there's IRE patterns, and then there's the primary colors and secondary colors. What else is there that would be so important that I'd want to go with, you know, like a pattern generator for just doing the calibration, not for doing focus and checking for ceramic aberrations or you know, alignment of, you know, if you can do any adjustment on the light, and if you have, you know, multiple things like the JVC.
Well, the advantage of a standalone pattern generator is the ability to know that you have reference level patterns. You know, you don't have to question what it's putting out. With Blu-ray players or DVD players, you always have to question what they're doing to the signal path before it goes out. And so with a reference level generator, we can do brightness, contrast, color, tint, sharpness, you know, all the basic stuff. We can do all the grayscales, we can do saturation sweeps, so we can look at all the color gamuts for saturations and primaries. And then the latest generation, we have the ability to generate 3D patterns now as well, which gives us the ability to put the display into 3D mode. And so we can start calibrating the 3D side of things, which last year the manufacturers weren't so good about giving us the ability to do that. This year's models that are coming out, they're starting to address that. They have separate calibration tables while you're in 3D mode, and you can do correction there as well.
I know when I was trying to calibrate Adam's Panasonic 3D, I gave up at the time on, you know, trying to calibrate the 3D part, because it's like, well, I don't have any 3D patterns, so what am I going to really, how am I going to calibrate this? And, you know, am I going to put like a lens in front of my Minolta to try to, you know, put the actual glasses in front to get the polarization to come off right? It was a very tricky proposition. What do you guys do? You have the 3D patterns now, or you say you have them on your pattern generator device.
Yep.
If you have like the C6 or something, what are you putting in front of that then to, you know?
We actually calibrate through the glasses themselves.
So
they're a very important part of the process.
But how do you make sure that, I mean, you have like, is there some stand that you have for the glasses? Are you supposed to hold the glasses?
Oh, we get creative. You know, between a tripod mount and blue painter's tape and various other things, you always have to be creative. I know there's what Photo Research brought out an adapter for some of their 600 series meters that you can, you know, hook a pair of glasses onto. They're the only ones that I know that have done that. But essentially, you know, we need to calibrate from our eyes through to the display. So anything that goes through that light path, we need to take into consideration. And often, if you pick up a lot of these glasses, the active glasses, you know, the active shutter glasses, and people pick them up and they go, well, they're yellow. Why aren't they clear? Well, for the fact is, when you put a TV into 3D mode, and you have active shutters, at any given time you're only seeing half of what comes out, you know, as we switch from eye to eye. And in doing so, you're losing half the light out.
So we talked about a price cap of, you know, $1,500 for, like, for instance, I was doing the RS65 and I had a C6. He said to get the NIST certified C6, it would be like a $1,500 cost.
Right.
Now, if I wanted to calibrate that RS65 for 3D, then I would need to get the pattern generator as about the only option that I have today.
Right.
How much more higher does that cap go to get that pattern generator with the 3D patterns?
Okay. It's a jump up. The Video Forge is approximately $2,000 for the base product that can generate reference 3D patterns. And so that's usually at a good point when you start questioning, you know, how much do I invest in my own equipment versus hiring a pro calibrator? You know, back 5, 6, 7 years ago, when colorimeters were that expensive, you know, often made sense to hire a professional and come in. So if you're going to be using your projector for a lot of 3D content and you care about the color quality on it, then that would be a good reason to bring in a professional calibrator that has the equipment for setting it up in 3D and calibrating in that mode. Now,
just for the sake of the use, if I had the JVC-R65 and I had the CalMan software and I did AutoCal and I had your test pattern generator with the 3D test patterns, would it do the whole automatic cal like it does in 2D, or do I have to do that manually?
For the 3D calibration, we can run through the same gamma grayscale steps just like we do for 2D as well.
So it's just boom and
yep.
Be off on that.
Yeah, and the AutoCal steps take about 2.5 minutes each to run.
The other question I had is, in your experience, I haven't bought into the 3D thing yet for projection, mainly because of the size of screen that I have and the loss of light. Mm-hmm. I haven't found a projector yet that does everything that I still want to have an awesome 2D image. I just haven't found that particular thing to invest in yet. If I were to have that, or let's say like on Adam's display on his Panasonic, I didn't calibrate the 3D. What, in your opinion, is, if I calibrate it perfect for 2D, is there really a big delta from the 2D to the 3D in terms of calibration? I mean, is it really off? I mean, is the glasses off enough that I have to do it, or, you know, that aside, is there a big reason that I'd need to calibrate for 3D on the same device?
The glasses are off enough. It can make a difference for white point balance. But again, it comes back to, you know, how much 3D content do you watch? Is it primarily animated for the kids during the day? So calibration probably isn't important. There's not a lot of adult-based movies that are, you know, 3D, and so it's not as important. My opinion, you know, where 3D is really going to start to take off is primarily with sports. You know, being able to watch football, basketball, baseball, you know, live sports over 3D. And so with that, does it need to be calibrated? You know, typically it's in a bright room, so I'm not as convinced that televisions for 3D systems need to be calibrated as much as you would for critical viewing for, you know, for prime movies that you'd watch in a properly calibrated room.
Okay. Well, thanks for your time, Derek.
All right, thank you, Kevin.
Nice talking to you.
All right, bye.